Welcome back to the France 24 debate. The role of the police is more and more under question in the Missouri shooting. The mother and father of the 18-year-old boy shot dead in the street by a policeman are repeating their calls for justice and for the officer to be arrested. Darren Wilson, is currently on paid leave. The family of Michael Brown carried out their own private post-mortem. It established that Michael had been shot 6 times, including twice in the head.
Dr. Bodden and I concluded that he was shot at least 6 times. We've got one to the very top of the head, the apex. We've got one that entered just above the right eyebrow. We cannot speculate exact order of gunshot wounds. Forensically, that's impossible. However, Dr. Bodden and I do feel, because of the 2 gunshot wounds to the head, indicating that Mr. Brown was bending over as they were coming down, that those 2 shots were most likely the last 2 to occur to him.
It shows a back to front for both of those. And it supports what the witnesses said about him trying to surrender. Why would he be shot in the very top of his head? 6'4" man. Makes no sense. And so that's what we have. And that's why we believe that those 2 things alone are ample evidence for this officer to be arrested.
Those words are certainly, for me, coming from the United Kingdom, where the police don't routinely carry guns, are chilling. The whole event is incredibly shocking. There's a reaction here. I mean, Nicole, Estelle, Clement, when you hear that, it's 6 shots, one's gone through the top of his head, it's...
There is absolutely no excuse for shooting an unarmed man 6 times. Even if, we don't know the details, but even if for some reason there was a confrontation between Michael Brown and Officer Wilson, the officer could have shot him in the arm. Obviously, he did. And that's enough. That does stop a confrontation. You can't shoot someone 6 times without checking on whether the man is armed or not.
I've got to say again, we've asked Missouri Police to take part. They have not got back to us, refused. The support group for a group supporting the officer in question has said it's not interested in talking to us. Clement, Estelle, your reaction to this word from the post-mortem?
Like, these 6 shots that Michael Brown received are actually, like, if you look at the precedent similar cases, it's actually not a lot. This is what, like, the most, like, surprising.
That's a very
if
scary
you had,
thing.
like, Sean Bell in New York, when I was like 2006, 2007, it was 50 shots. Amadou, I don't remember his last, Amadou Diallo was like 41 shots. So it means like these 6 shots like are like more on the lower scale of like what could have happened.
It's very scary what you're saying, and of course it doesn't make it any more justifiable, any more okay,
and each time,
obviously.
the individual, the victim, was unarmed. So like it's really like there is a disproportionate use of violence, an excessive use of force by police that is recurrent through this kind of like cases. Like
unarmed and Estelle Black.
Yeah.
Oh, it's horrible.
Always black victims. Always. That's what I seem to see anyway.
Most likely, yes. It's really horrible. There's no word. As you said, there's no word. I think we all agree on this, that things has to change. It cannot continue that way. It's not because you are afraid of something to happen that you react over proportionally. There is no logic.
It's not a license to shoot. I mean, I understand a police officer wants to protect his life. They're dealing with drugs, they're dealing with a lot of guns, but that should not at least go into, shooting through people without any regard for their lives. I mean, police officers have to protect themselves, but they should be respectful of the lives of the people across.
Preliminary findings say that the entrance wounds seem to show that Michael Brown was shot from a distance. There was no gunpowder on his clothes, for instance. So the idea that the police officer might have been under threat kind of diminishes a little bit, doesn't it? This kind of doesn't look like he was under threat at all. We weren't there. We didn't hear it. What we do know is that we have 2 people in the States with a great insight into policing and, of course, into the community. Tefpo, the rapper, and William Terrell, who is expert on policing. Tefpo, I'll start with you, if you can still hear us on the phone there in St. Louis. When the results of this autopsy, these findings, the 6 shots, one going through the top of his head, when this hits the streets there, when people find this out, or when people have found this out, What is the reaction?
You see, the problem is the people in the community saw this shooting. Everyone's treating the people in the community as if they're irrational and they don't know what they saw, or, they're psycho. But everyone saw this already. We already knew that Michael Brown was shot in the head 2 times. And that's the exact fact that we've been yelling to everyone, telling the entire world that we saw this man shoot him in the head with his hands up. When I arrived to the scene, Michael Brown's blood was still in the street. They left him out there for 4.5 hours. They did not send an ambulance. There has been a cover-up to hide the fact that this is what actually went down. There was no violent encounter. According to the community, there was no violent encounter on Michael Brown's behalf with the police officer. He was blatantly shot, executed in his apartment complex in front of his family, his friends, the people he went to school with. And people don't know how to respond to that, and that's what we're witnessing right now.
Tefpo, would you draw parallels with the Trayvon Martin case? I know it's different circumstances, but maybe in a sense that the driving force behind it is the same?
I believe so. I definitely do. We're dealing with a situation now that's starting to shape up and look pretty similar to the Trayvon Martin case.
Just to remind people, Trayvon Martin, of course, shot by a neighborhood watchman, if you like, who said he saw Trayvon Martin acting suspiciously. It turned out he was carrying a bag of Skittles and a bottle of iced tea when he was shot down. And, of course, that sparked a great deal of anger amongst not just black communities, but communities across the United States. Is that exactly what we're seeing in St. Louis right now? Is that something that's going to continue, you think, Tefpo?
I believe so. At this point, I firmly believe that the relationship between the black community of Ferguson and the Ferguson Police Department, and maybe even surrounding police departments, is permanently severed at this point. What happens from here, whether or not we get a conviction or charges for the officer in question, can dictate how everything goes from here. But if they don't get some specialists and people that are invested into the actual black community on the ground, I don't see anything changing.
Indeed, one of our viewers on Twitter saying that same thing, that money has to be put into education in these areas, and laws which are going against people's freedoms need to be repealed too. Some might say guns need to be banned as well. Have you been surprised, Tefpo, by what you've seen on the streets? The reaction?
No, not at all. Not at all. I thought in the beginning that this thing would go on for maybe 2 or 3 days, and the only thing that surprises me about it at this point is how long it's going on, and it looks like this is going to be an ongoing thing.
And what about the police action? Has that surprised you?
Not at all. Ferguson Police is a very aggressive police force. Most police departments in America are aggressive, as one of the commentators on the panel said earlier. They're very aggressive. But Ferguson is very different. They run down the streets at 80 miles an hour with children playing in the street. They act as if they are a rogue coup of militiamen, and no one can watch them. There's no rules and regulations in place to punish them for their wrongdoings. I've personally been pulled over by Ferguson Police, and the first question they asked me was, where are the guns and the drugs? They have no regard for the people of the community that are higher-ranking members of the community. As you can see, they arrested a city official, a city government official. They threw Antonio French in jail as if he was a common criminal. He's done a lot of good for the community and so forth. So they're not a respecter of persons. And as you can see now, there's very little communication with them and the actual community. It's as if they don't even care.
Tefpo, bear with us for the moment. We'll bring you back in as soon as we can. At this point, I'll remind the viewers, and I've said this already before in this debate, we asked the police to take part. They haven't got back to us. We've asked the support teams backing the officer who carried out the shooting, allegedly. They say they're not interested in taking part in this debate. I'm going to bring in William Terrell. William, with your knowledge of policing, I'm interested in your comment on the piece of video that we're going to show while you're talking and while you're talking to us. The video is of, it seems to be, or it's supposed to be, of Michael Brown carrying out a robbery in a store nearby. And I'm interested in finding out from you why you think the police decided to release this video when they did.
Well, I think part of it becomes the demonstrate that there's some background context here involving Michael Brown. How that relates to the actual shooting, though, I can't make that connection. I don't think there is a connection, because when it came to the shooting, what happened in that convenience store doesn't merit any kind of legal response from, or legal proper response in terms of use of force. The officer had to have a fear of imminent threat of death or serious bodily harm when he decided to shoot. And we don't know what that threat was. I think the autopsy report works against the police department and the officer, because it was at a different distance. He was unarmed. So I can't posit what the deadly threat was in that officer's mind. I would like to say, though, based on some of the earlier comments, I want people to understand that while there are aggressive tactics employed by various officers throughout the country, the research all points in the same direction, including my own research that's been done in nearly a dozen major U.S. cities over the past 20 years. Most police officers in the U.S. are not aggressive. In fact, my research and other researchers that have studied this and devoted their life to studying this show that officers often use less force than they're legally required to use. They're often trying to de-escalate encounters in which the suspect's attempting to escalate. That's a very different picture than when you have these critical incidents that portray the police as aggressive. And in this case, it does appear the police were aggressive. And there are cases where the police are overly aggressive. But most police suspect encounters, the police are often using less, not more force. And that's been empirically validated in most cases. I think that's important to remember.
William, we noted that one. Let me bring that to our studio, because I've got people here, of course, who've had experience of policing. Can I ask you, Estelle, with your experience, not being white, being on the streets in the US, did you feel that you had that comfort about approaching a police officer or being approached by a police officer?
Yes, I was always scared when I had to come in contact with a police officer. At border, when I have to travel, at immigration, everywhere. Because there is always a kind of suspicion. I'm talking about when I'm facing a white police officer. Might raise the issue of racism in America, but I think it is something that exists. I was always feeling more accused.
Can I ask, is it
Yes.
better in France?
Somehow, yes, because I think we have more open-minded people in France than in the US.
Okay.
Because it's like the US is a very small
I think some people might
country.
disagree with on that one. Nicole?
It can actually even go beyond that. And I so agree that it feels dangerous and threatening to be a young black person in America, and especially a black young man. Even Barack Obama said, it is, you fear for your life at times, and you feel always suspected. Yes. But even being white, even being female, even being kind of skinny, I mean, I dread encounters with police officers, and sometimes I'm totally wrong, I can come across somebody who is really kind and really doing his job the best he can, but still, there is this feeling that they can go overboard easily. One thing I wanted to mention about the video is that not only it doesn't prove anything, it doesn't bring any additional information about the shooting situation, but the Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder, voiced his opposition to the releasing of this video because, basically it's character assassination, some kind of justification of the shooting. And obviously, in Ferguson, people need a clear, reliable investigation. They need to know what happened and why. They need to see that the officer will be not necessarily brought to justice, but investigated, and not that the police is trying to show that Michael Brown was not an honest man, that he couldn't be trusted. I mean, obviously, he seemed to have stolen a pack of cigarettes. I mean, there is no death penalty for that.
Let me bring in Tef Poe to talk about this one, because I'd be interested to hear what you think about it, sir. The idea of this video, this security video footage from the store, which purports to show Michael Brown carrying out a robbery or taking part in some sort of a robbery, purely and simply to smear his name. Would you agree with that?
I do agree with it. We don't necessarily know exactly what's happening in that video, but all signs do appear that there's a robbery going on. I think that they released this video within the timing that they did to kind of push back at the community, since the community was pushing so hard on them to release the name of the officer. I think it was a tactic that was thought out, and it was done kind of vengefully to say, well, you guys are doing all of this over a guy that did this.
William Terrell, it wasn't as if the police officer in question was responding to that crime when he shot Michael Brown.
Correct. Yes. And I mean, it's hard to justify.
So there's no link, really, is there? You know, there's no justification. Sorry, sir, you carry on.
Yeah, the release of the video and showing that, I don't see the link, and it's unfortunate it was released when it was. If it had merit, it should have been released sooner, but I just don't see merit in the release of it outside of if it was requested under a Freedom of Information Act, then they were required to release it. But in terms of the shooting, like I said earlier, the shooting, the use of deadly force can only be done if the officer feared for his own life or life of others. And I don't see any justification with that. Certainly the strong arm robbery wouldn't justify that, even if he was responding to that call, which he wasn't. So it's hard to reconcile the police giving much credence to the video.
Clement Thierry, of course, this was done after we'd heard from Michael Brown's parents about what a nice guy he was, what a nice kid he was, and how he was cuddly and nice.
Yeah, like I just wanted to build up on what William Terrell was saying. There is something like, of course, there is no link between the video and the shooting, but it's like very consistent with the ways in which the police is understanding its own form of policing, meaning prevention, being proactive. This idea that, look, we tried to arrest him for jaywalking, then the shooting happened, but in fact, behind, he was like someone committing crime. And here there is like the fact that the police of Ferguson released this video, revealed the ways in which it thinks its own form of policing through like prevention, proactive, etc.
But you know there are so many, and you know this because of what you do, you know there are so many social reasons why people commit these kinds of petty crime, the little sort of silly little robberies like that, which, you know, often go wrong and often end up with someone dead, which is tragic in itself. But it's a tragedy that people are pushed to do those kind of things, isn't it?
If I understand correctly, like who Michael Brown was, like he was going to college, like he was going to trade school. So like he was basically like fulfilling the classic upward mobility pathway that, you know, like young kids of 18 are supposed to do. So in fact, he was like we don't need to come up with a story of like poverty to actually understand what's going on here. In fact, the story here to me is really a story about like the kind of how like black communities are fed up with the ways in which policing is done in their community. The tremendous difference between how is it to be policed in black communities, low-income black communities, and in white communities is tremendous in the US. And when we see what's going on, when we see the protest, and in fact that's the key to me puzzle about all of that, is like how comes there is not more protest, what you call here riots, but to me that are actually protests. Why there are more, like, not only more protests, no more numerous, more widespread protests against this form of policing? Like, that's to me it's not a story about like poverty.
I hear what you're saying, and just to underline that, of course, the police officer was not responding to that robbery when he came across Michael Brown and shot him 6 times. There was no link in that at all, and the only link we're making is because the police decided to release that video when they did, and maybe one day they'll have to stand up in court and justify why they did that. Let's bring in Tef Poe again. I hope you're still with us, Tef. In terms of what happened that night when Michael Brown was shot, do you believe if he were white that he would have been shot?
No, not at all. I've thought about this 1,000 times since this incident, and I believe that if Michael Brown was white, he would have been stopped. he would have been harassed, but it wouldn't have ended with him being shot. I thoroughly believe that.
What are the factors then, do you think, that make the police, or maybe, I mean, I can't ask you to put yourself in this officer's head, but what are the factors that make the police so aggressive in the way they're doing things, according to our experts, according to you, so forceful in the way they're carrying out their duty to protect and serve?
I think that we have to really be honest about racism in America, and to be more specific, racism in Missouri. This is a very segregated city, and even more segregated state. Missouri was the last state to free the slaves. So there's a culture of, close your eyes to certain things, just live with it, just let it be. We often talk about diversity and diversity training, but we often speak about those things to like-minded people. They very seldom take an officer that is a closet racist and sit him down with consultation about his beliefs and his views and what formulated those.
So how do we change that?
I think it starts with the notion that silence is consent. I've seen black police officers that work for Ferguson. They're under a gag order. They can't talk, but they stand on the line with the crooked officers that may be white, other crooked officers that may be black. And I think there's just this culture amongst the police force that you don't speak on certain things and that you stand with your officers, your fellow officers, at all costs.
Nicole?
In terms of changing, and this is what all this situation is about and all what our debate is about, I mean, we can look at what happened in places where it got better in the United States. I think, first of all, there needs to be an absolutely clear, transparent, reliable investigation that will be supervised by the federal authorities, because there is no trust, as we've heard many times, between the black community in Ferguson and the police. The second thing is that the police in Ferguson must hire black officers. They cannot look anymore like this white occupation army. And that's happened in LA, that's happened in many other cities. And there are other things that can be done, and that involves for the black community in Ferguson to get more involved into politics, try to get elected, try to be there in the city council, in the mayoral office, in all those public offices, get involved, get elected, and that as well, has deflated aggressivity, tension across the country.
There is a black president in the White House, which obviously is a very good step along this way. But as you say, lots more ground to be covered. Let's bring in William again in Michigan. William, Nicole, they're talking about the fact that a full, frank, proper investigation needs to be carried out to make sure people start to have some kind of faith in the police. Will that happen?
I think it will happen in this case because of so much attention brought to this particular case. I think the issue of police culture is a good one. In my observational research, police culture exists, and there is some racial aspect to that for sure, and particularly in the areas in which the police view as high crime, so-called bad areas. There's a culture of us versus them, and this dates back years, a century, us versus them, that this is the community that needs to be policed. And just as there's a distrust from the citizens toward the police, the officers that police this area often have a distrust of the citizens as well. So it's a two-way street here. And what does that result in? It results in the officers forming bonds, very strong bonds to stick together, as your rapper guest had mentioned, to the point that the officers will stand behind one another even when they know that their fellow officers do, because of that bond, that distrust of the broader citizens. And it's very unfortunate. You get the distrust on both sides, But some communities have made great progress with integration of their police force, with having the police force look like the community in which it polices. And Ferguson's not there. They're far from there.
William Terrell,
here
I
we are.
need to wrap you. We're out of time. I'm very sorry to stop you because I was very interested in what you were saying, sir. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Tef Poe as well, joining us from St. Louis. Let's hope you have a calm night and things start to calm down there as you get, we hope, step by step more towards justice. Thanks to our guests here in the studio, to Nicole, to Clement, and to Estelle. Thank you for joining us. And most of all, thanks to you for watching. This has been The Debate on France 24. Stay with us.